All right, time to open up the 1998 Magic the Gathering 30th Anniversary Countdown Kit Pack. I can't keep saying that, it's just too big of a product name. But let's talk a little bit about 1998 and then we'll see what's inside. 1998 kicked off with Stronghold, which is the continuation of the story with the Weatherlight crew. Stronghold represents Volrath's stronghold. The crew, they're headed there to rescue their friends. That's basically the gist of the story, and we're going to learn a lot about everybody's secrets and ulterior motives along the way. I think if you go back and read the story, at least 3, maybe 4 characters are captured that they end up going to rescue on this mission. So, some of the cards in this set. Volrath's Stronghold is one of the cards in the set. Kind of obvious. It's the titular card of the set. A very popular card, especially in Commander's Sliver Queen, which is unfortunately in the reserve list, and in my opinion one of the cooler cards that you could play in Sliver's Tribal. We also got Ensnaring Bridge, which if you look at the artwork represents an actual bridge from the Stronghold, but more importantly this card will show up in a lot of competitive play for years to come. Some other cards that come up in Stronghold are Mox Diamond, my favorite card in the set, also on the reserve list. Burgeoning, a card that's seeing a lot more play in recent years because of the popularity of the Commander format, and Dream Halls, which has some weird art and is a pretty cool card. After Stronghold comes Exodus, because we need to leave the Stronghold, and that's the story. The Weatherlight crew is making a mad dash out, they have to use a special erratic portal to escape, and I think Urza gets left behind. Also coming with Exodus were some pretty cool cards like Coat of Arms, City of Traders, Mana Bond, Sphere of Resistance, and Recurring Nightmare, a card that has a good home in my cube that enables some really degenerate graveyard shenanigans. On an interesting note, Exodus is the first set to use the expansion symbol in a different color to denote the rarity of a card. What a better way to round out the year than to continue the story of the Weatherlight crew. Or have a giant flashback and insert Urza as now a big part of the Weatherlight crew, because that's what's going to happen for the next year. If we want to make things even more confusing, the next 3 sets are going to focus on Urza, the game's most popular artificer. And the design of the next 3 sets is all about enchantments. Okay, Urza's Saga. With Urza's Saga came a lot of push cards, and with it perhaps some of the most broken cards to come out all at once in the game's history. The next couple of months is going to be referred to as Combo Winter. In fact, it's going to be so bad that, according to Randy Buehler, players were leaving the game in droves. That being said, there are a lot of cool cards in Urza Saga, and we have to give them credit where credit's due. Cards like Show and Tell, Sneak Attack, Exploration, Gamble, Gaia's Cradle, and Time Spiral. All of these cards have seen play in the Legacy metagame, and most of them are staples in the format. Interesting thing to note about Sneak Attack, when the card came out, most people thought it was terrible, and probably they were right. A lot of the creatures at the time, if not all the creatures at the time, that you could sneak into play with Sneak Attack just weren't worth the downside of sacrificing them at the end step. It wouldn't be until many years later where you could include cards at the power level of Grizzlebrand and Emrakul into a Sneak Attack package. Okay, so let's see what's inside the 1998 booster pack. I'm hoping it's something from Urza's Saga, even though I just talked about how much it broke the game, but that's a set chock full of a lot of powerful cards, so let's see what's inside. We've got a Smokestack. Smokestack is an excellent piece of Magic's history. Let's take a look at what the card does. Smokestack is an artifact, and it says, at the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a soot counter on Smokestack. At the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifices a permanent for each soot counter on Smokestack. That's an interesting design, right? So why is this card useful? Well, Smokestack harkens back to a card design that was definitely more popular in the 90s than it is today, and these are lock pieces. In fact, the deck archetype built around primarily using lock pieces to keep the opponent out of the game is known as a stacks deck, referring to Smokestack, one of the more popular cards that enables this archetype. Smokestack is strong. It forces players to sacrifice permanents, any kind of permanents, even lands, especially lands, and the player utilizing Smokestack is going to have an advantage because they've most likely built their deck to either mitigate sacrificing permanents or perhaps even capitalize on the fact that they're sacking permanents. Plus, some of the upside of Smokestack is that you can choose when you put a soot counter on it. And in a pinch, one of the permanents that you can sacrifice to Smokestack is Smokestack itself. So again, the player playing the smokestack has a lot more agency over what's happening with the effect than the person on the other side of the battlefield. Smokestack saw a good amount of tournament play in the late 90s, and it still shows up in commander deck lists and cubes to this day.